Hi, everyone. Welcome again to Mentoring Developers. This is a podcast and YouTube show for you if you are new to software development. If you want to be a software developer and you have questions, nobody wants to answer them, you'll come to the right place. And we have a very special guest who actually does help people like you in his day job as an instructor at a code camp. But first, I want to know what made him change his career from being a software developer, manager, and getting into speaking, and all of a sudden taking a kind of a tangent and going off into something that most of us don't get to do, which is teaching and training new developers. Hey, Matt, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. So it's kind of funny because I'm that guy who had to give speeches to the teacher over lunch, like just to her shoes in high school. I had that extreme anxiety, and now I'm literally paid to talk, which is just this weird thing I'm still wrapping my head around. But I'm sort of your stereotypical developer. I was really born with this mind that was sort of inclined towards coding, and I had early exposure to it, which really helped. And I've been programming probably since 1987 in some degree or another, but professionally since 2001 or so. I was loving it. I loved programming. I loved everything about it. And then about 5 years ago, something just radically changed for me. And it was like we were going about our business. We were building our features, and then I kind of showed up to work, and I found that my fingertips were a little numb, and I sort of started to have this numbness and slowness and sort of walking around like an 80-year-old man pretty quickly. They put me in the hospital and told me I had a rare neurological condition that is thankfully temporary called Guillain-Barré syndrome. And I was paralyzed for like 3-4 months. And by the time I was back into work and back recovering, we'd hired on a few new students or new developers. And I found that my job had sort of changed a little bit when I came back. So I wasn't doing as much support work anymore. I was doing a lot of active development and a lot of mentoring, a whole lot of mentoring. And what I slowly started finding was that I really loved being able to teach the new developers all about these things that I cared about and had made such a difference to me. And I almost love that even more than building these awesome things. So my job became really awesome after a pretty lousy time in my life, where I got to go and build awesome things and teach other people how to do that. And so I started thinking about that. I'm like, well, wait a minute. I'm getting older. What do I want to do with my future? I could keep doing this if I wanted to, or maybe I could start looking at getting into management, or maybe eventually teaching. And so I went on and found a team lead job. But I had happened to work with a woman named Katie DeTore, who went on to be our campus director at Tech Elevator Columbus. And so every year, like clockwork, we do lunch like once a year and just say like, hey, if I wanted to teach at some point in my future, what should I work on? Like once a year, city barbecue. And she said, well, maybe you should speak a little bit more. And so I started doing things like that. And I had thought maybe about 2022 I'd get into it. And this year we met like clockwork, and I was like, hey, so here's what I've been up to. I'm still looking at this, maybe going down the CTO route instead. But I'm thinking maybe more teaching than CTO. It just feels more like me. And what should I work on? She's like, no, you're ready. We'll let you know when there's an opening. It was not what I expected her to say. But, it just is these random, weird, sudden, I can't go into work, I can't type, I can't taste anything, I can't walk, to, hey, I can code again, but maybe there's something else I could be doing. Maybe I could be helping others more. And so, I got to move into development, and that was a lot of fun. Or move into mentoring and teaching, and I've been doing that since since everyone left for the pandemic earlier this year. And it's the hardest job I've ever had, and it's the most fulfilling I've ever had. I love it.
Wow, that's quite a story, and I'm glad you're doing better. And a lot of people out there may be going through something similar, but what's good about our industry is that we have a lot of options, which is very fortunate for us. We can work from home, we can teach, we can work at a big company or a small company, a secure job, corporate job, government job, lots of options. So it's good to be a software developer, right?
It is.
Right. So tell me a little bit about your origin story. Why did you get into this to begin with?
So my dad's an actuary, or was an actuary. He worked for a number of insurance organizations, and because of that, he kind of had access to like this IBM PC sooner than a lot of other people's might have had it in their home. And so I still remember like being this little kid and sitting on my cousin's lap while she was playing the original like the King's Quest games in our house, and I was like, oh, computers can do this. And then it's like a few years later, I started finding things like QBasic and GW Basic and Turtle or Logo, sorry, and saying, oh, I can make computers do things. And so my hobby from like 6th grade until now has been making computers do the things that I want them to, and that's pretty cool. I don't know. There's just something really interesting and attractive about that, and it was a lot of fun for me. And in fact, I studied I studied less than I programmed in high school and college, and maybe not the best choice for my parents' comfort, but I think it wound up okay in the long run.
So programming is a great outlet for a lot of people. For me too, when I was young, and it seemed to be something creative that you can do, something you can do by yourself. You don't need a team, and you can actually make something that's great. But these days, kids, it is hard. It is hard to focus. They don't want to do anything. They don't think of computers as a thing to make a thing. Computer just becomes an appliance. A computer is for them a way to watch videos or to play games, which is great, but it can do so much more. I'm trying very hard to teach my kids how to approach this in a way that I thought people like me, who started using computers before the internet was so widespread. It existed, but it was not widespread. We had the advantage. We had the time to focus. I
had a pretty unique advantage too, in that when I started getting into this professionally too, like I got into C# back when it was in beta too. And, nowadays I teach C#, which is awesome, but there wasn't 20 years of history associated with the language. So now when I'm teaching C#, I have to teach 20 years of its history to the students, because the syntax keeps changing, right?
Yeah.
And they're going to see all sorts of stuff inside the real world. And we got new languages coming in all the time, but they all carry on this new syntax, and many of them are built for existing programmers to learn versus newer ones. And so it's it's a harder barrier to entry. And you look at all the things we're doing now with the cloud and things like that we weren't used to doing 20 years ago. So
right.
It's challenging. There's a lot. Our program at Tech Elevator is 14 weeks long, and we cram as much into that as we can.
Right.
But there's just this growing weight of things that we expect our beginners to know, and it's making it harder to get into programming. Or it's not impossible, certainly, but it's
right. No, you're absolutely right. Because 20 years ago, you weren't expected to know all these things, because those things were either didn't exist, or they were so new that very few people knew it. The good thing is, on the flip side, that you have now the ability to make a real app that actually does something useful, and people can actually use it in a matter of days. So that's something that we couldn't even think of, right? Just distributing software was a question. It was a nightmare, right? Just like now, if you're a musician, if you have something to share and people like it, you don't need a record label. Just like that, we don't need to print CDs and discs. I remember the days of floppy disks, right? So
yeah, I can remember buying a number of floppy disks and zip disks and CD-ROMs and stuff like that back in college and high school. And like, hey, if I write some code and I want to share it with my friends, I gotta get a stack of these things and ship them out. And now it's like, no, just right click, hit publish, and pay my Azure bill every month.
Yeah. So I remember when I was reading. I was a big networking buff in college, and so we used to read this book about networking, and the guy would say, it's very legendary. I don't remember his name, but he was legendary in our industry, and he said something like there are lots of networks, right? We have the wireless network, we have the wired Ethernet, and all these different types of networks. However, the fastest network is still SneakerNet, which you basically download a copy onto a device and walk over to the other computer. That's still the fastest. You can't beat that. You can't say that anymore.
No.
Even 10 years ago, just streaming videos. That would be a crazy idea to say, I'm going to primarily just live stream HD videos of all types of shows. That was impossible. Netflix was actually mailing DVDs.
Yeah,
nobody talks about that.
My mail regularly. Yeah.
Right. So technology is changing. Our abilities are increasing. So now the expectation is higher. The bar is so high. So now if I want to teach my 10-year-old kid about programming, and I make a little console app, a terminal app, where you give it some input, it gives you some output, something that I would think that's pretty cool, right? Not that attractive anymore, right? Because now the bar is set so high. So you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
So you started, coming back to your story, so you started early, but did you feel like you need to get a degree in computer science, or did you feel like you really needed that accreditation from somebody to say, yep, you can now go ahead and develop, or did you feel like you just went in?
Well, so I felt like I needed a piece of paper for other people to believe that I knew how to do what I did. I didn't learn a ton in college about programming, and it was really about getting that piece of paper. And honestly, that was a little hard for me. Just with I had a lot of depression as a kid. It left in my 20s, etc. But it was tough. Nowadays, I think that's changed, and my industry is proof of it, right? Like software engineering boot camps, right? Like we have some really astonishing placement rates, etc., and people really love our grads. But 10 years ago, that wasn't as respected, and it's still becoming more and more respected over time. And I think as we see like rising levels of debt from student loans and things like that, people will start to see that, oh, well, these little programs, these trade schools, etc., like they really can give you a very targeted education. And the other thing is, yeah, it was good to have that education and that time in college to grow up. But looking at the folks I've worked with in like smaller organizations, there has not been a lot of diversity. A lot of the people in those organizations have, looked and had histories just like mine. And you look at people who are trying to change jobs and get into tech, and well, they haven't been coding since they've been in high school, right? Like, and imposter syndrome is normal and prevalent throughout the field. And how are they supposed to feel getting into it, and how can they get in if you need to go back to college? And we have some really astonishing people in our program who are taking their skills and histories from other organizations and other industries and just applying technology to it, and it's really cool. And I think we need more of that, not less.
Yeah, that's good, because we have a huge need. There's a gap between what the world needs, not just this industry. Software, as we say, is eating the world because everything is going to eventually be run on software. You can't avoid that. So there is this current need for the current companies, but there's also this other need, the potential need for all the things that we're not doing right now because we don't know how to do it right now. So there's a huge gap, and it's almost impossible to fill. So it's a good time to do it. But if you say that you need a 4-year college degree in computer science and you need to take these particular courses, the assumption is that if you have done that, then now you are good to go. So if you've graduated and a reputable institute has given you this accreditation, like you are now a graduate from this school with a 4-year degree, the day after that, you are now on a project and you know what to do. How false is that?
Well,
We
I
know this is not how it works. You go in there, I don't care where you graduated from, you don't know what you're doing, because academia can never give you a taste of what it's like to work in the industry, right?
Yeah. And every organization is different. They use different technologies, different libraries, different processes, different team structures, etc. And so, most of the time when you're interviewing as a new developer, you get asked all these questions that you don't even know what they're talking about. It's like, what's your experience with Entity Framework? What's that? How would you serialize a large object over JSON? Oh, well, I don't know. I know how to serialize objects. I know how to communicate with things. How do we describe caching and its purpose? It's like, well, how much do we realistically expect somebody coming in the door to know?
Right. And that's
versus how much can we train them on the job?
Right. And so training, mentoring, apprenticeship, those are concepts that I didn't hear when I started in the industry. You're just supposed to just know it or do it, or you fail, nobody cares. They'll get somebody else to replace you. But I think there is a place for that. So somebody like you, who you're training them, it's a classroom structure, I know.
Sure.
But essentially you're a mentor. And if people like you or people with your role existed in companies that are maybe hiring hundreds of developers, and they had, for every 50, they had one person who had the role, the assigned role of being a mentor, they were paid to do it.
Yep.
Right? Then I think you would see that a lot more people would succeed, and it will become easier to get new hires and retain them. Right now we have a problem of retention. I see a lot of people coming in, and a good number of them, they're overwhelmed and they move on, or something happens to them. But so we're missing out, I think. Go ahead.
I think we need to look at it also from the management perspective, right? Like, a lot of technology managers get told, "Hey, you're managing now. Here's a promotion. You did really well. You're now managing." And is their focus on the people that they're now managing, or is it continuing to do the thing that they were trying to do and build the products the organization needs them to do? Hopefully, it's a little of both. But I think the more that we can encourage and train new development managers to mentor and to invest and to really want to train and uplift their teams, the more success we're going to have as an organization. Because you can have a larger organization where you have somebody dedicated to coaching and mentoring, but are folks going to listen to somebody they don't see that often versus listening to their manager? I think the management role needs to be pretty big in the mentoring picture.
Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. And what I'm saying is that it's not a one size fits all. We don't have the solution. I've interviewed so many people on this podcast. We've had discussions. So there are different ways of handling this. But as a team, if you are thinking about it, okay, we're going to have new people come in. They are not going to know maybe our way of doing things, or maybe they have different opinions, and they can enrich us from their experiences, but we need to show them the way a little bit. This is how every other industry works. Literally every single place you go, if you are a master furniture maker, you hire somebody who may have done some work, you're not going to make them go ahead and make a $5,000 piece of furniture. You are going to show them your way, the ropes, perhaps show them the machines, watch them, help them. You don't just throw them into a CNC machine and say, "Okay, go for it." Doesn't work.
Or have a surgeon do an operation.
No, but we do that all the time. I have seen it. I have seen interns being asked to do critical things, and they do it. To their credit, they do a good job of it based on their training. But again, they're going to move on. And then somebody else will have to maintain that, make sure it works. And if there's a fallout because something really bad happens, so people, I think that the process is missing a little bit of empathy is missing that we can just add it up. I think this is an exciting time to be a developer.
It is.
But I think it's also an exciting time to be a manager, where you have the chance to sort of train the next generation, right? Like what you're doing. We need people like you. It's good to know that there are people who care about new developers. Right?
Yeah, I really loved management. I was not managing as long as I thought I would before I moved on to the next thing. The slots don't open up that often. But it really is the same sort of a thing. Instead of less focus on building things for the organization, I'm more focused on mentoring and training more.
Right.
And even my role as an instructor, 12 of the weeks of the 14 weeks, I'm wearing the instructor hat. The last two, I'm a coach. The students are all building out their final projects, and I am investing in them and helping them with the things that they get stuck on. But it's more like, hey, all these things we told you, go and do, and we'll help you. That's really exciting.
That is
we're just entering that. We're entering that phase now, and I'm just I'm just giddy. I love it.
That's great. That's great. Okay, so let's go back a little bit to the time that you were looking for your first job. Now, you had the degree, you had background in programming, but you didn't have work experience. So how did you get your first job?
Yeah, so on paper, I should have been a shoe-in almost anywhere I looked. I had been doing work for my university in a programming capacity for .NET when it was in beta. I've been programming since I was a kid. And then here we are, 2005, 2006 or something like that. And I'm this kid with a BS in computer information systems and walking with a poorly fit button-down shirt into Verizon Business's headquarters and feeling horrible imposter syndrome. And I was on the market for probably 3-4 months. And I'm looking back and I'm trying to figure out how that happened, because I don't mean to sound cocky, but I knew, I was maybe on par with a mid-level developer. I just hadn't worked in an organization before, and so finding somebody who's going to trust me, going to invest in me, going to take me on, I think was harder. Thankfully, I found one, but it took me a long time.
I wonder if it's because your resume wasn't really attractive, or maybe you got a lot of interviews, but you were nervous. One of the two.
Or nervous, cocky. Like how do you represent that? Like, how do you say I've been doing this since I was a kid without sounding arrogant?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
I've been there.
Yeah, I got in the door, and that was really the hardest time looking for a job I ever had in my career, at least thus far. So I'm really never looking
the first job is.
I love it.
Right. So people want to see your history. Unfortunately, nobody has the time to invest in you or to take a chance. Most of the time, what happens is they want to know that other people like you, and they feel, okay, if other people like you, then maybe I will like you too. So the first job is very, very hard. This is why I tell everybody that they should work in a company. They should accept almost any position that they get. The first thing is to establish themselves in a way and have something that they can put on their resume, which helps them to get their second job, which is, I always say, the second job, that's the job you really want. First job is only to get you the second job, because if you try to get your great job in your first try before you have any work experience, you may be wasting time, and you may not get that job anyway. You get a job, work for a year or two, then get your next job, and then get a significant pay bump. Right?
Yeah, that's usually how it rolls. Yeah,
and so a lot of times the problem is we don't know what to put on our resume when we haven't done any work in a company before. Let's say you've never had a job, but so this is where the personal projects come in, right? You do some projects. Here's what I did. So for instance, if I'm applying for jobs and I want to do something, maybe I have some work history, but it's not related to what I'm trying to do. So what I do is I would do my own projects, take them to a state where I'm comfortable with. Maybe they're online, maybe they're not, but at least I've conceived something, implemented it, executed it. Maybe 1, 2, 3 of those.
Yeah,
and then
you can answer those questions that you'll get on like, hey, what's some hard problem you had to overcome? What's some technical problem with have you ever used inheritance? Have you ever give me an example of encapsulation? All these things,
right. And you can do that, anticipating what kind of questions you'll get. But another thing, what I was trying to point out is, I would put it right at the top of my resume. I would say personal projects, not hiding. These are not paid, but these are the projects. So now it gives me the chance to get the interview, and then give me the chance to talk about it, because every experience counts. So another thing I see in a lot of resumes is that they will add, for instance, they worked at a Kroger as a cashier. They'll add that. They'll add a lot of experience, which is good. It's good to know that you know how to work.
Yeah.
But it doesn't tell me anything about your skills as a developer. So I think those are not that useful, in my personal opinion. I think it's good to have, if you have nothing, it's better to have that. But I'd rather just put a whole bunch of personal projects and links where they can actually check it out. GitHub repository, just proof. You want them to think that you know what you're saying and you can do the job, right? That's what it is. And
what about for folks who have completed like Pluralsight courses or Udemy or LinkedIn Learning or something like that?
Yeah.
Those kind of things that should go on the resume, or?
I think that's a good idea. But if you've just taken a course, that shows that you have initiative, that you want to learn something. But that's it. Yeah. But if you haven't done the project, then it doesn't show that it depends on what you're doing. So what I would do is I would have a section for personal projects. These are the projects that I have done or I'm doing right now. And then I would have a section of skills that I already have and a section of skills that I would like to have and I'm working on. For me, it shows people, to my mind, it shows, maybe not the recruiter per se. Recruiters don't see that, but the hiring manager, the actual person you'll be working under, would be like, that person is trying to learn. Maybe you're a .NET developer, but the job is in Ruby on Rails, and you can say, I have done these 2 projects in ASP.NET MVC. And I know about REST services because I've made this REST service, but I've made it in ASP.NET Web API. I've done all that. I know about object relational mappers because I've worked in Entity Framework. And I know about dependency injection because I've done this other thing. However, I'm also learning Ruby on Rails and trying to learn the same things in this other framework, which, by the way, your company uses. So I think like you build up a story, right? And so the hiring manager, if they actually get the chance to look at it and to look at your cover letter and your resume, they'll be able to make the connection. Why would I hire this person? Oh, and you just lay it out for them. I think you just touched on something that's really important, is this: create a compelling story for yourself, including your trajectory of where you're going. Like, especially if you're coming from another industry, like, hey, I was a project manager and now I'm getting into programming. I think that my skills over here are going to help me do this for you. This is what I'm currently learning, etc. I think that's one of the aspects that we really help our students with, and it helps them succeed in finding that first job, which is always, tough. Just being able to tell that compelling story. And does the cashier at Kroger help your story? Probably not. And circumstances differ for everybody, but usually not. Right. Yeah. That's because if you're applying for a technical position, I think the problem is, if you want to show that you are technically strong, that this doesn't help, right? All it shows is that you're responsible, which is okay. It's something, but it's not that relevant. This is how I feel. Like, I am a manager and I am a tech lead and I do all kinds of things. I've been involved in interviewing people as well. So when I look at a resume and I see, 90% of it is irrelevant, that doesn't leave a good impression for me. So that's I'm just talking from my personal experience, because it is competitive, unfortunately. So how do you stand out? Right? How do you stand out? I don't know how. I don't have the the final answer, but I know that if your resume shows the things that you have done and that you are doing, and it's not, so compare that to somebody who's been working at a job for 10 years.
Yeah.
And they've been doing this one thing very well for 10 years. One project for 10 years. They may be very, very good at this one project, but they have nothing else, right? So unless somebody is looking for in exactly the same thing, it's not a very compelling resume, right?
Yep. And yeah, getting that job, those subsequent jobs as a specialist is hard. Trust me, I used to be one.
And and we have discussed this before, but one of the problems that I have, or I found myself in several times, is that I'm working at a job, I like the people, I like the job, but it is just repeating the same thing again and again. And I know that within a very short time, that is the only job I'll be able to do, because it is so specific to that company.
Yeah.
Now, if this is a way for you to progress through the ranks, and maybe you see yourself in the next 5-6 years, you'll be a manager, and then maybe after that you'll become a director or something. You'll go up through the ranks, and you want to establish yourself in that company, and you have this very, very specific, very good domain knowledge. Perfect. Great. But for the vast majority of us, that's not the case.
Yeah.
So then what do? I'm not asking you to quit your job. Just do something else that the world wants, and do it on the side. And don't make it so big that you can never do it, right? Make a small project that can be done, but that gives you a chance to express yourself, right? Because people are looking to see what can you do, and we don't know. So just give them the chance. So this is good. Now, once you get your first job, then after that, it would have become easier to get the second job, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
So, and then you would get this third job, and then you move up your career. Then in your case, you decided to become an instructor, which I think is a great career move. Now, I want to ask you this about your own mentors. Did you find people along the way that would help you, that would be like, Matt, let me show you how this is done. Let me take you under my wings. Did that happen to you?
Yeah, a few times for sure. Sometimes it was actual managers and bosses. Sometimes it was coworkers. Occasionally it was random people from the internet. Conference speakers, Pluralsight authors, things like that. Sometimes you got to go looking for them. And sometimes it's you got to try something and figure out who knows the thing that you're trying to do, and maybe learn from them for the things that they've written or spoken on, and then maybe reach out to them and say like, hey, I read X, Y, Z. I'm really looking to progress in this. Here's where I am right now. What do you think? And just take a tiny bit out of time, reach out and say, hey, do you mind giving me a short answer? And that can work. But it's better to find a peer in your workforce, either somebody, on the same team, or a manager, if you're lucky enough, or somebody senior who's not your manager, who can really invest in you. And I got some very good career advice from a boss. Actually, it was a boss after he gave notice, but he told me many of the things you've been talking about shifting and moving on. And I did follow some of that same advice, where I was specializing in some technologies, but we weren't really working with databases. And while I loved it, if I'd stayed there for another few years, would I be able to tell a compelling story to get that senior dev job without a database experience on my resume? And so sometimes you do have to take that next step. But there's also, happiness can be hard to come by. If you really love what you're doing, you love the people you're doing it with, like there's value in that. There's monetary value in that.
Oh, yeah. And it's happened to me many times where I really, really, really enjoy the environment that I'm working in. And I really like the people. they're friendly, and it's a good atmosphere. So it's very hard to leave. I completely empathize with that. But you have to know what you're doing. You have to commit to that. You can say, this is okay. I may be doing the same thing for the next 5 to 10 years. I may not learn much, but I'm going to have a peaceful life in that time. And that's totally fine.
No.
But
I stayed in the same role for 9 years, and it changed like significantly as well. So like even if you stay like doing the same thing, technology changes on its own, and you're gonna often adapt with it. So
yeah, that's true. But there's another side to that, which is if you feel that the company is not as stable, the company may not exist in 10 years, or the management may change, people that you're working with may leave. All these things can happen. And if you think that it is going to hurt your career prospects to work in, let's say, obsolete technologies and so on, then, you have this opportunity to do something on the side. It's a lot of work, yes, nights and weekends, but do a little bit on the side to have some kind of momentum going.
Yeah.
So that at some point in the future, if you had to leave, you will not be, dead in the water, right? Mm-hmm. It's a terrible feeling having to go into the unemployment office and not knowing what kind of job you'll get. It's very unsettling. But if you have a focus, let's say that you're working in Windows form, right? Just native Windows apps, right? Yeah. There are tons of jobs for that. They pay well sometimes. Maybe you like the environment, but you know that if that job went away, then the next job may be very hard to find. So then you say, okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to learn Android development because I really enjoy that. And it's completely off left field. It's like way different from what I was doing. But the next job should be like that. So then you start making your Android apps on the side. It may take you 2 to 3 years to build your first app, but at the end of it, you would have an app. And at that point, you know what you will be doing next. So when now your time, let's say the company folds, and now you need to find a job, you're going to make your resume to find an Android job, and you have that experience. So it's good to have focus. What I've seen a lot. So what I see a lot, Matt, is that people their company fires them or lays them off, and they're like, I don't know what to do now. Because that's all I knew. Don't be in that position.
You don't even have to leave the job too for it to be useful. Yes. If you're stuck in kind of an older, obsolete technology, and if you're not, wait till 2 years and it will be obsolete by that time. Is generally how it goes. But if you're using something and you want to branch out, you can do the side project kind of a thing, which I do recommend heavily. I love those. But one of the things you can do is you can talk to your manager, talk to your coworkers at work, and say, "Hey, I've been working on this cool thing. I think it's really cool. It doesn't really serve a whole lot of purpose, but it's kind of cool." And then when the next wave of change comes for your organization, and they're like, "Hey, we want to start this new project. Hey, does anybody know Vue.js?" And everybody's like, "Oh yeah, Matt's been playing with that in his spare time." It's a chance to have some new opportunities. If you get into things that you think are relevant or potentially relevant for your organization, and you let people know about it, then they're like, "Hey, Matt, what do you think about this new technology? What do you think about that?" And it starts to help you within the organization. So even if you don't want to move, it's very helpful to your trajectory, to your skills, to how you're looked at within the organization as well.
Absolutely. And it depends on the organization. If you're in a large enough company that has multiple departments, absolutely, yeah. There's never been a thing that I did in this industry that I did not benefit from down the road, even if I did something that seemed really stupid initially. And I was like, what is it? Why am I doing this? But a few years down the road, it came in handy. Yeah. So it's always good to learn and be plugged in, and you may get an opportunity in your company or outside of it. Mm-hmm. So let me show our viewers where they can actually get the show notes and links and all the useful information that we're going to share for this episode. This is going to go on YouTube, and it will be also on iTunes, Spotify, all those places. So the lesson to be learned here is, if you are a new developer or you want to be a developer, you can do it. There's lots of opportunity. There's good money to be made. Different types of things you can do. And Matt's there to help you if you need his help. And we're going to put his contact and his Code Academy and all that other stuff in the description, and also on the website. The link is on the screen, mentoringdevelopers.com/episode 86. And also you can send me an email at us@mentoringdevelopers.com, and I can answer your questions, or I can forward it to Matt or any of the other guests. So, what are you going to talk about now? How can people get in touch with you, Matt?
So the best way to get in touch with me is on Twitter @IntegerMan. It's probably the best way of getting in touch with me. But you can also email me at I got about 3 or 4. Let's say admin@side.dev.
Okay, great. Integer Man, I like that.
Oh, yes. I got bored during trigonometry class one day and started daydreaming. And yeah.
Looks like a
little did I know I was inventing my internet handle.
There's Batman, there's Superman, there's Integer Man.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah.
Awesome. So Matt, you're going to send me the links, and I'm going to make sure that's on the website.
Absolutely.
And so people if you are listening right now, you will be able to get all the links on that link that's on the screen. And so it's a pleasure to have you, Matt.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Okay. All right. We're going to say goodbye now, and we'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.